Azra, can you please explain to us what is liberalization and why is it a big issue in terms of the people's food security and food sovereignty? Over to you, Azra.
Thank you so much, Vivan. Thank you so much, Bobby. When you talk about liberalization, liberalization is actually the it's a very tame name for political subjugation, for a recolonization. I will just very briefly read something which Hubert Humphrey, a one-time US Vice President, had said. He said, quote, "I have heard that people may become dependent on us for food. I know that was not supposed to be good news. To me, that was good news because before people can do anything, they have got to eat. And if you are looking for a way to get people to lean on you and to be dependent on you, it seems to me that food dependence would be terrific." So this is the philosophy of liberalization. And this was kind of, uh, it was thrust on the third world countries, on the so-called developing countries, with the formation of the WTO, the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization is made up of many, many horrendous agreements. Some of them are TRIPS agreement, the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, the sanitary and phytosanitary measures, technical barriers to trade. But one of the most critical are agreement on agriculture. So the TRIPS agreement and agreement on agriculture combined are a death knell to the small farmers, to the landless farmers of Asia. I think it's very critical to look at them as a collective set of agreements, whether it is RCEP, whether it is BRI, whether it is WTO, and it should, for us, for the people, it should really be looked as a block, a huge, big cement block which they are creating around us like they have done in Palestine. In Palestine, it is a physical wall that they have created around the people. For us, the wall is very much um, is invisible, but the block is, but that block is there. They are putting us into occupied territories, and we have to live our lives as occupied people if we don't stand up and resist. So I think maybe I will not talk about more about RCEP or BRI in detail, but I think it is very important to know that the WTO was the precursor of very, very anti-people, anti-farmer, anti-women agreements. The intellectual property rights agreement is horrendous. It takes away farmers' rights to save seeds. That agreement, uh, TRIPS Plus, is the name of the game with all the later regional free trade agreements, and they copy. So the baseline is in international trade that you cannot go less than the WTO. That is why I think a focus of, of organizations like us, of people's resistances like us, is to maintain that WTO has to be dismantled. WTO has to be taken down because WTO has agreements which have teeth, which have legal mechanisms to be implemented in our countries. And whether we have RCEP, or we have BRI, or we have other free trade agreements which are coming into our countries, WTO remains the base. It pays us to be very complex in how we analyze these agreements. We should not do them, we should not be reductionist in looking at these agreements one by one. Of course, we need to know them one by one, but we need to bring an analysis which encompasses all these agreements together in a fight for food sovereignty. Thank you.
Food sovereignty as a framework is very useful for neo-colonial countries, like us in Asia, that want to embrace localization to counter and reverse liberalization. Food sovereignty refers to the right of peoples, communities, and countries to determine their own production systems, which are ecologically, socially, economically, and culturally appropriate to their unique circumstances. It is the right of communities and nations to fight the power of corporations and other forces that destroy the people's food production systems and deny them food and life. And therefore, at the heart of food sovereignty should be a strong mass movement of farmers and small food producers, no? Of workers and consumers, and all their advocates, no? The scientists, the technologists, the human rights advocates. No? It's a broad people's movement that will push for the policies and programs to dismantle the monopoly control of transnational corporations and landlords over land and resources, and to reorient and radically transform food systems toward addressing the basic needs of the people.
We need to fight at every level, and amongst ourselves, amongst the critical actors, the people of our countries, the producers, the consumers, the women, the youth, the students, the academia, everybody. We have to have national platforms fighting for food sovereignty. And I really mean the word fight, because you're talking about land. The corporates want land, the Americans want our land, the Chinese want our land, and we will have to stand up and fight. And we will have to develop many different mechanisms for fighting, from very militant forms of fighting to maybe just growing agroecology, using agroecology, saving our seeds, indigenous seeds, local seeds, going back, taking back our methods of production and our lands of production. So I really have, Bobby, nothing to say what our government is doing, which would promote food sovereignty. It's doing nothing. And we are doing a lot. So I have full faith in the people of Asia and the people of the world, the women of the world. We will stand up and fight, and the governments know, and they're doing the best to prosecute people, to kill people, to victimize people, to criminalize people. It's okay. We are used to it. We have been living under colonialism and neo-colonialism, and we have learned to fight, and we know how to fight, and we will fight.
The number one is that the government should stop victimizing the human rights defenders, and then land rights activists, and then peasant right activists, and then they should stop killings of these peasants. And that should be the one of the major area we need to bring in as a part of our demands. Second one is withdraw all the licenses that has been given to the corporates to occupy or grab the agricultural lands, and then convert the agricultural lands for food production zones into the corporate agriculture and then commercial agriculture areas. So that has to be stopped now, and which need to be, as Azra said, that we need to really thrust upon the people's movements, building the people's movements to stop all those kind of intruders. Third one is provide support for peasantry to really uphold and also sustain the food sovereignty zones wherever the people are able to survive without even the support of the government should be supported with respecting to the local technology, and also because the technology which is coming up in a big way in rural area where the agriculture workers and peasants has been losing their lands, and agriculture workers are losing their employment. And then fourth one is stop agriculture lands converting into the non-agriculture purposes. So there are some laws in India, state laws, which are very progressive, that agriculture lands cannot be easily converted into non-agriculture purposes. Of course, you know that all those backdoor methods, but at least there is a law which can be fight and then stop such kind of conversions. And some states are still are able to protect. Then stop the entry of the governments and also the MNCs into the domains of the forests where the indigenous people have been protecting the forest and have the right over the forest producers, for which some of the like in India we have a law which need to be implemented, so that the Forest Rights Act, where the people depending on forest cannot be thrown out or displaced mercilessly.
In the WTO, there is a built-in mechanism wherein during a crisis, such as the pandemic, for instance, countries can actually reinstitute their tariffs. So I'm saying this as a policy reform. I'm pushing for We can push and fight for more protectionist measures, but at the same time, we can reinstitute tariffs on foodstuff and agricultural products. We can reverse government deregulation of local production and even marketing and trade. And we can hold our governments accountable for hunger and poverty. And Chanaya has already mentioned we can abrogate not only unjust trade deals, but also agricultural land concessions given to corporations, foreign or local. And to make it as a framework, I think food sovereignty means assertion. It doesn't really happen like just a framework, or it's not just a set of rights. The key word in food sovereignty, it's assertion. And all these policy reforms will be really nothing if we don't have people's or farmers movements that will assert for these policy reforms.
Through the People's Summit, we hope to contribute in the building of and strengthening of a global movement that will challenge the monopoly control of transnational corporations over food and agriculture. We hope to further strengthen the ongoing campaigns at the national, regional, and global levels against neoliberal globalization, against the hazardous technologies being peddled by transnational companies that harm the people and our planet, such as genetic engineering, agrochemicals, and others. It is a campaign against dubious innovations, such as digitalization of farming, that will only further deepen and expand TNC domination, among others. So the People's Summit is a venue where we can harness, consolidate, and promote the concrete policy proposals from different countries, such as those mentioned by our friends earlier, from different regions and from different sectors, on how we can advance food sovereignty and how to transform the food systems and make it truly just, equitable, healthy, and sustainable. And this process will be facilitated through a series of national and regional events and sectoral and thematic workshops. And the outputs of these activities will feed into a declaration and action plan that will be adopted during the actual People's Summit in September. So we are inviting to join the People's Summit everyone who share the aspirations for food sovereignty and the fight for genuine agrarian reform. We invite everyone who believe in the call for land to the tillers, those who reject the wanton plunder and destruction of our natural resources for corporate profits. We call on everyone and invite everyone to share the vision of a future where communities of people and not the unaccountable and profit-hungry transnational corporations are the ones decisive in determining the direction and priorities of food and agriculture.
There has to be a massive resistance against liberalization. And we need to prepare ourselves in every community, in every village, in every city, across to stand up and take our rights for food sovereignty. I think COVID-19 has shown us very, very clearly that we can only, in the end, rely on ourselves. Our communities have to be totally self-sufficient in looking after ourselves. And when we look after ourselves, we actually look after the entire world.